recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates.
I want Israel to win and Hamas to lose, but this is not an Armed Services Committee hearing about the military. It's a judiciary hearing about speech. And in that vein, I am reminded of the great words of the philosopher Austin Powers, who said, "There's only two things I can't stand: people who are intolerant of other people and the Dutch." And a similar tension seems to be on display today, because on one side of the witness table, we have people saying, we have speech that we would like to have vindicated, and we're under this tremendous pressure from these entities that offer a heckler's veto of what we're trying to get out. And then on the other side of the table, you have people saying, well, there's speech we really don't like that's anti-Semitic and problematic, and we got to figure out ways to root it out. There is an inherent tension in having that discussion on those terms, and increasingly it feels as though if we like speech, then any effort to constrain that speech is really problematic and the committee needs to explore it. And if we don't like speech, we're increasingly censuring it on the House floor. We're increasingly confronting it on pretty negative terms. So, I guess I want to just go through some of the statements some of our witnesses made. So, Mr. Marcus, a celebration of what happened on October 7th, let me disclaim, is offensive, horrid, but is it constitutionally protected speech?
Thank you, Congressman. It may be, but it depends, and I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If you say, I'm going to celebrate Hamas, and then you celebrate them by giving a big talk, doing a little dance, that can be deeply offensive and protected.
Right.
But if you say, I celebrate Hamas, I am part of Hamas, their mission is my mission, and I will do what I can to advance them, that may be material support for terrorism, depending on what exactly you do.
No, I think that's right, but what you focused on there is the conduct. I think that was a really good explanation and parsing of it, because speech is different than conduct. When someone says, I associate with this known terrorist movement, then that association has more sort of a conduct flavor than someone saying, I think what happened on October 7th was good, right?
So I think that's right, Congressman, but with one caveat from the law interpreting the Terrorism Act, which is the following. Material support doesn't need to be dollars. It could be guns. It doesn't need to be guns. It could be pens. And it can be the sort of PR activity that could be done by a commercial firm.
Man, see, that's the thing. PR activity sounds a lot like people talking. And so I just think we have to be careful with that. But I do want to move on, because I think it was Dr. Nadel. Is it possible to criticize George Soros without being anti-Semitic?
I don't know all the tropes that people use to associate with George Soros, but when they talk about
No. Not when they talk about something else. Is criticism against George Soros ever not anti-Semitic? That's the question.
Ms. Burdett has offered to answer that.
No, but you mentioned Mr. Soros. I want you to answer. There's no phone a friend here in the Judiciary Committee.
What has happened in the United States is that we use different code words.
Right, no, I'm not. That's not the question.
No, wait, I'm answering your question.
Okay.
We use different code words to disguise anti-Semitism. And so Soros has become the code word that replaced Rothschild.
But is it possible to
Shylock.
Criticize him without being anti-Semitic? Yes or no?
I don't know the context. I'm not going to talk without knowing context.
That is just an astonishing thing. And similarly, you said any critique of globalism is anti-Semitic. Now, that really is an Austin Powers.
No, what I said was that the word globalist, I didn't say any critique of globalism. What I said was the word globalist had become the new code word
but it's not,
for the internationalist code word from the previous period.
But you ascribe that motive. See, when I criticize globalism, I'm often criticizing the UN, which then in turn goes around and criticizes Israel. So if critiquing a globalist entity that criticizes Israel is anti-Semitic.
So why use the word globalist instead of the UN?
Well, because the UN's goals are to have a global order over things that deprive countries of their sovereignty. One of those countries is Israel. That is the great hypocrisy of what I think is frankly a reverse trope, that any criticism of Soros or any criticism of globalism is somehow anti-Semitic. Sometimes they're just criticisms of Soros and of globalism. But I see my time's expired and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Yield back. We now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here to testify. Like so many millions of people, I watched the events of October 7th with unbridled horror. I found it hard to wrap my head around the magnitude of the brutality, the nature of the butchery, the murder of whole families, the rape of women, the desecration of bodies, the burning families alive, families clutching each other, lying in bed as they were machine gunned. And I asked myself, how is it possible that people could commit such acts of barbarism? And I think I probably speak for many in the Jewish community when I say that as horrifying and traumatizing it was to witness that, it amplified the pain to see the reaction, the almost immediate reaction in the United States and around the world was to not condemn the butchers, but to condemn the victims, to celebrate Hamas's acts of unbridled terror. And then I asked myself a different question. How is it possible that people could justify the butchery of whole families, the wanton, deliberate violence directed against these innocent civilians? How could that be celebrated? And I don't think it can be celebrated unless you view Israeli life, unless you view Jewish life as somehow less than a human life. We spend a lot of time debating the definition of anti-Semitism. I'm not sure I could give you a clear analytic answer to that question, but it seems to me at its most basic, viewing Jewish life as less than human life is the very definition of anti-Semitism, or it's certainly anti-Semitism in its most extreme form. And what I see happening on college campuses with a glorification, with people talking about how empowered they felt at seeing women butchered, peace activists mowed down, the fact that many Jewish students don't feel comfortable expressing their Jewish identity, at a time of their lives when they should be free to discuss whatever issues they want, free to be themselves, is just horrifying. I remember years ago talking to the president of the Jewish community in France at a time when many Jews were leaving France because they didn't feel safe there. And he told me the French government was doing what they could to protect the Jewish community, but who wanted to live in a country where you needed protection? And I remember thinking years ago, thank God that's not the case in the United States, but now it is the case. And not for Jews alone. We've seen a horrific rise of Islamophobia. Even as we mourn the death of an older Jewish man in Los Angeles who died when struck at a protest, we mourn the loss of a 6-year-old Muslim child. It's just horrifying. Dr. Nadel, I'd be interested in your thoughts on how you see anti-Semitism today. How is it different in character than what we've seen in the past? Ms. Burdett, I'd be interested in your thoughts on how hate online leaps into the real world and what we might do to combat that.
The anti-Semitism that we see today, since you closed with hate online, is horrifically magnified in a way that it has never been this magnified before, because you can reach millions and millions of people by expressing anti-Semitic ideas, including all of these old ideas about Jews as internationalists and old ideas about Jews as corrupted by money. And so what we have in this moment in time is we have millions of people, especially when leading personalities, whether they are members of the government or they are entertainment figures, when they post these kinds of anti-Semitic messages, and then it just explodes. It goes viral. I don't spend time looking at the social media because I think you could just spend all your time doing it. But I had a student last semester in my course, Anti-Semitism, Enduring Hatred, who told me that she had spent the previous week 40 hours looking at TikTok videos. So I looked at her, I said, when did you ever do any of your schoolwork? And I was a little concerned. But the point is that anti-Semitism is magnified in a way today because of social media that was just unimaginable in earlier eras.
I thank the gentleman. We now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for our panelists, for all of you being here today. Appreciate it very much. So I just want to point out to my friend from Georgia who has left the room that apparently 22 MAGA Democrats also voted in favor of the censure resolution last night. So I think that's important to get out. But be that as it may, I want to just kind of get into some of this. We'll deal with some of the anti-Semitism. We'll talk also about the anti-conservative bias in education. So I'm going to give you two personal examples. Number one, I belong to a church. I think it's the only American church that's ever been actually an extermination order was issued by a governor, Governor Lilburn Boggs of Missouri, to actually give license to kill members of my religion over 150 years ago. I could, little bit. The other thing is, just to relate to this, so we talked about the UN just a moment ago. So at 40 years old, having practiced law and tried literally hundreds of cases, actually representing NGOs at the United Nations and other multilateral institutions. By the way, there is no other organization I know that is so openly, anti-Semitic, in my opinion, than the UN. The Israeli representative was constantly ostracized and ignored and maltreated, in my opinion. Anyways, so I decided to go back because, being a lawyer at the international level, that was good, but being a PhD at the international level and a lawyer really got a lot of credence. So I decided to go back to get my degree. Unafraid, very conservative. But the one thing I know is when I was on that campus in Arizona, by the way, somebody mentioned that I was graduated from elite universities. I can't wait to tell ASU and U of A and BYU, they're considered elite by some congressional witnesses. But the point is, as I was there, I had to duck and hide my beliefs because the professors held you. You sit in a master's degree or a PhD class in seminar. How could I express my thoughts knowing that a grade below a B because the professor disagrees with me? And I experienced that. They control your destiny. So I want to ask to our three students, tell us a little bit. We'll start with you, Ms. Silberstein, Ms. Jordan, and Mr. Ogrizjak. Is that how you say it? Close enough? A little bit about whether the administration or the institution of whether it's Cornell, Iowa, or Buffalo, did anything to hinder your identity as a student or your beliefs or your, let's just go with that.
Thank you, Congressman. As for Cornell, in the case of anti-Semitism, following the massacre on October 7th, President Pollock issued a statement in which she essentially conflated the horrific massacre of Jews on that day with various natural disasters occurring in the world, such as an earthquake in Afghanistan, which was extremely baffling, tone-deaf, and insensitive, and truly hurtful to the Jewish community on campus. Now, many incidents, as I've mentioned, have occurred since then in which the Jewish students at Cornell have been threatened repeatedly, most recently with a student's comments posted online to directly go after and attack students.
So when we have a threat, that is not protected speech. That is criminal speech. Was there criminal prosecution, investigation, arrest made in that case?
In the case of the student who was just arrested?
Yes, tell us.
Yeah, so this student was arrested, I believe, last week, and he was arraigned. He is currently being held, and his parents claim that he made these comments due to his mental health issues. But regardless of any, mental health issues that could have caused these statements, it's evident that the sentiment created on campus by professors and students alike of pervasive and just widespread anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric has created such an atmosphere that has enabled him to make these comments, and that really fuels the fire within many students who may feel hostile to Israel to attack Jews because of it.
Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I asked the questions of the others. May they respond to?
Thank you for your question. So our flyers have been torn down, our chalk is washed away, and we even had an advertisement sign for one of our speakers, Chloe Cole, stolen, and the police recovered the sign, but they didn't figure out, I guess, who took the poster. We never received that back. And this stuff has been ongoing, continues to go on, and it's obviously showing that there is an equal opportunity for our speech. The left-leaning students groups, they get their posters, like theirs are literally right next to ours. You can see the remnants of the tape and our poster design still there, but then their posters are completely unattacked. And like I have met with the university president, I've met with other staff members to discuss this, and it just seems like there's no move towards change. I've asked, I was like, okay, what can we do to at least let our messages heard so we can have people attend our events and hear different points of view? And I still haven't received any other options, because it's a shame that we have to have different things be done so that we can have our speech heard. We should have the equal opportunity to have our flyers up just like other left-leaning students. We should have equal opportunity for our chalk to be unerased so that, we should have to do something different. And also all these actions that these students are doing violate school policy. It's very clear in the handbook, and again, it still keeps happening. So I just would like to see something positive, like just us being able to stay represented without being hindered.
Thank you for your question. I was very fortunate myself to not face any academic penalty while I was still enrolled at the university. However, I was also a biological sciences major. Oftentimes political topics stayed outside the classroom. However, we did have those 3 professors that I had mentioned in my opening statement circulating a petition, heavily protesting our Michael Knowles event, calling for it to get shut down. So I do recognize as well that while I was lucky, I did not have these professors in class. I recognize other students may not be quite so lucky. And additionally, it was very obvious that the protest following our Allen West lecture was mishandled. There was danger posed to students. This was widely documented through police reports, yet there was no apology from any university officials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back the chair. Now recognize the gentleman from California for 5 minutes.
Ms. Burdett, you are an expert on anti-Semitism, and I want to read a few different statements to you, and if you can just give me a yes or no as to whether you would consider them anti-Semitic. I prefer my kids' new Hanukkah from Kwanzaa. At least it will come with some financial engineering. Anti-Semitic or not?
Very potentially.
I just think that's what they're about, is making money, in a reference to Jared Kushner and his Jewish family. You think that's anti-Semitic?
Anti-Jewish stereotype.
Planned Parenthood was made by Margaret Sanger, a known eugenics with the KKK to control the Jew population. When I say Jew, I mean the 12 lost tribes of Judah, the blood of Christ, who the people known as the race black really are. This is who our people are. Anti-Semitic or not?
A little too confusing for me to decipher.
We'll get to that. This ain't a game. I'm going to use you as an example to show you the Jewish people that told you to call me that no one can threaten or influence me. I told you this is war. Now gonna get you some business. Still confusing?
Uses two stereotypes about Jews as being motivated only by business and having nefarious control that isn't real.
Last one. I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. The funny thing is, I actually can't be anti-Semitic because black people are actually Jew. Also, you guys have toyed with me and tried to blackball anyone who opposes your agenda. What do you think about that one?
Anti-Semitic.
Yeah. So what I'm concerned about is that we have anti-Semitic posts coming from this committee. And last October, the chairman tweeted out on October 6th, Kanye, Elon, Trump. Those 5 statements that I just read to you were from Kanye West, who had made a number of anti-Semitic statements before this tweet was put up, and then made the DEFCON statement about a day after the tweet was put up. I, the chairman at the time, Chairman Nadler, many people in the Jewish community asked the chairman, Chairman Jordan, to take this down. And it wasn't just members of Congress. It was nonpartisan Jewish organizations who said, Kanye West is anti-Semitic. I don't know what you're doing, but please do not give him a platform by leaving this tweet up. It stayed up for months. Defiantly, the chairman kept this tweet up. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to be just today your accountability partner, your online accountability partner, and just go through your social media. Because if we're going to have a hearing about anti-Semitism, we can't allow a tweet like this to be posted on our side or your side. In 2019, Chairman Jordan also tweeted at Tom Steyer and used the $ for Steyer to spell his name. Again, known Jewish philanthropist playing into what Ms. Burdett mentioned earlier, tropes about Jewish people and money. So this committee should have a conversation and a hearing about anti-Semitism. But I would first insist that the chairman, I don't know why he put this tweet up. Either he believes it, which I hope is not the case, or he just wanted to own the libs. And if that's what you're doing, you're hurting a lot of people by keeping that tweet up for so long, especially knowing what it represents. And if we're talking about being your online accountability partner, Chairman, you still have a subpoena in your inbox that's about 500 days old. And with that, I'll yield back.